And hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for taking time out of the busy schedule and the return of the South Texas Border Sports Podcast. I am the host, Ray Silva. Folks, just a little brief update. We've been trying to work a little bit hard on the back scenes to try to get our podcast available through Amazon Music for those who follow the podcast or get your podcast through Amazon Music. But not to worry, we still are available through Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, anchor.fm/STBS. Folks, for this episode, we are covering the huge 6 point encounter coming up Saturday night at HEB Park between RGV FC Toros and New Mexico United. But to give us a glimpse on the other side of the coin, I would like to welcome from the We Are Seek and Strike podcast, a podcast that covers New Mexico United, Chris Walker. Chris, thanks for taking time out of the busy schedule. Appreciate you stopping by. How is everything going today?
Hey, what's going on, Ray? Everything's going good today, and I appreciate you having me on the show. They're certainly looking forward to giving you information for your listeners to kind of know what they're getting into going into this third installment of the match between the Toros and United.
The last time these two teams met, it ended in a one-all draw in a game that could have gone either way, just based on the results, only because it was one of those games where RGVFC at the time were still getting their roster somewhat constructed, and still to this point, right now they're barely finding their, I guess, their level at this time. But for New Mexico United, what is that challenge for them now that they have to go on the road to try to pick up a massive 3 points for them uh, come Saturday night?
Well, I think the big challenge right now for United, having to have a 3 game road streak. I wouldn't say that it's going to be so much based upon um, home fan advantage, because I mean, obviously United has a better record on the road for some reason than they do at home currently. So for some reason, I'm not sure that that necessarily plays a part. But what the thing is right now is probably just along the lines is really playing together. I mean, there's definitely been some philosophy updates, I think, in the coaching over time. Having Kevon Frater back, which is good for the side, but also, I'm sure it, now creates a different system because Frater is more of a true striker playing up top, and they're really trying to, play him in that role and just kind of fit the other pieces around it. And so I think that's kind of a part of it. But this last match against El Paso, you really saw kind of a different United coming out of the box than maybe you saw in previous matches if you were just kind of just tuning into a little bit of what they were doing. They definitely looked a little different this last match, and I think a lot of that really deals with buying in to the philosophy, but let's not skirt all the other technical things. I mean, it was a derby, so very much so that I think they kind of rose for the occasion.
Absolutely, as I'm being joined by Chris Walker. Chris, just looking at the historical context of this series, 2 wins apiece for each of the sides, 5 draws. More impressively about this series, none of the road teams have been able to win. What's going to be key for New Mexico United to try to come away with 3 points on what could be a very humid night at HB Park?
Well, I mean, I think that if if Toro's head coach really did his homework on the film, then he knows one that the offside trap just outside the 6 yard box is definitely something that they can play to their advantage. Look at what United is, but as far as I think what United's going to have to do to try to come away with 3 points is they're going to have to really, I hope that they've thought about shot selection, right? I mean, like I said, the offside trap really played to their disadvantage, and 34 of their 39 goals are scored inside the box. So they will have to really hope that the Toros bite on the way that they're covering men, and that they can kind of get in behind them when they are in the box, and kind of obviously uh, cause the trap to be reset if that's the strategy they take. But also, I mean, they gotta think, just be a little. They gotta just ball out and just be willing to let a couple fly from outside the box, because it doesn't seem like teams really are doing too much pressure against them when they're like just floating outside the 18. So I mean, that could be something that really sets them up for success.
You were talking about the offensive prowess that New Mexico United has. Yeah, just looking at some insights, courtesy of FOTMob. Uh, Ranked 16th in the league when it comes to shots on target per match, which is four. And then also another of the stats that comes out here on the insights, ranked 13th in goals and scored per game at 1.4, which is just a few places higher than RGVFC, which is in 16th at 1.3 goals per game. How does this play into the advantage of New Mexico United? Because certainly the one disadvantage that RGVFC has coming into this home game is that they haven't scored in three home matches.
I think where things get interesting, because I looked at those numbers too on FOTMob as well. And I mean, to RGV's credit, you guys had some really big games. You had a 5-0 win against Las Vegas Lights. I mean, that obviously helped to boost your average per game. And I would imagine, not looking at FOTMob currently, you might have a few other matches where you had multiple goal scoring games, to the fact that United, with their with their 1.39 4 and 1.11 against average, is that a lot of the games were decided by one goal for the most part, right? I mean, if you take away, I mean, obviously the 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 7-0 victory over Phoenix earlier in the year. I mean, right, those things. But United's still struggling to score multiple goals per games, right? They get a lot of draws, or they're also conceding just as many goals as well, with 31 that they've conceded to date. So I think really, like, again, like, I mean, we're already here now, right? They've already played 28 games. Like, we're not at a point where, and I believe, how many games does RGV played? 27, is that right?
Yes, 27. So yes, that game in hand is going to be ultra important for us, especially for the fact that the team hasn't scored in the last three home matches. It's going to be our coach doesn't believe in six pointers. I mean, you can go back into my YouTube archive, and I've asked him multiple times about the 6 point question, and on multiple occasions. And for him, he sees it as a final. And this is
Yeah, and
where I kind of I feel like bickering right back at him because I don't ever recall a regular season match ever handed a trophy out at the end of 90 minutes. It's either you get three, one, or zero.
well,
And
and
that's, I mean, it's either you win, lose, or draw. I mean, there's nothing in between. There's no hardware to be given out on a given day.
right. And so, I mean, two points that I'll make, one on either side of the coin, as you put it earlier. One is, if United can have just as many opportunities and come out with the same energy that they came out with in the first 15 minutes of this last match against El Paso, and they are able to stay on side, right? Obviously, I mean, some of that's the officiating, but some of it also is, I mean, the guys did eventually pick up their heads and figure out where they were, right? So if they're able to take those shots sooner, then they're at a point where the traps normally are getting set, which they'll probably figure out in the first 10 minutes. Then they have a really good chance to probably do a little damage. Now, the other half of it too is, so they came out in a 3-4-3, but they were shifting out of possession into either a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 at times. The key thing there was, excuse me, is that Ratty Ovuka, who is, man, he is a stellar player and at wing, can obviously do a little damage coming up fourth. This obviously still kind of honing in his cross game, but shifts back to play as like the fourth back at times. And, if he is too high up or cannot obviously either mark his man or play the zone that he's kind of covering, then that maybe serves as an opportunity for RGV to capitalize. But that's going to be on the what we call that, the far right channel. Here we would probably refer to that as like the high, mid-high, wide channel, or even kind of like the lane that's like kind of in between what is the middle pitch and wide, right? So just kind of that, just outside the goal box kind of lane, if you will.
Absolutely, as I'm being joined by Chris Walker. Chris, you look at the last 300, less than 365 days. This is going to be the sixth meeting between the both clubs come Saturday night. You date back to the last 5 games of the series. A 2-0 win for you guys on September 29, 2021. A 1-1 draw on October 9th, 2021. October 23rd, 2021, a 2-0 win for RGV FC. Then flip the calendar to this year. July 6th, July 1, you guys earned a 1-0 win on a clean sheet, and then a 1-1 draw on I guess, near the death score for the Toros. HEB Park is a park that generally is a big park, just due to its size. How will this affect New Mexico United since they play in a much smaller dimensions and in a baseball field?
Honestly, it I think, since they're not, because even their training facility doesn't necessarily offer what, say, the facility over at HEB offers, right? It's still standard like lengths and whatnot. I do think this will be what will be interesting to kind of keep an eye on, is United has been focused on playing the very wide ends of the pitch, playing against the touchline as much as possible. Now, obviously, with this being a wide area, like, maybe it opens up the game a little bit more. We do have some players with pace. I'd like to really point, obviously, Frater out, point out Tabor Itaka, Preston out. Preston typically plays he plays kind of like in the right wing, or like in that midfield kind of that four set, and he can get some good pace. So with a lot of with a big area like that, it allows him to probably get some distance. Again, like I said, they're going to obviously have to look out for any offside trap and kind of be able to stay on, but I think it is going to maybe play into their advantage. I can't see really. I think it's the same side of the coin on the other side. I mean, if I just, like I said, look at this last game, like if players lose sight of their assignments or of like their areas that they're covering portions of the pitch, then that's a lot of area to try to make up. The only thing though is, like I said, the players who are playing those spots have some pace. So Radiavuka is very fast, and 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 maybe more room, not being as congested, will give him more room to do more things.
Abs-
So
yes, absolutely. And one of the final things on this podcast that I wanted to touch base is the I guess Spot Mob labels it the top scorers for each team. It's the Battle of the Caribbean forwards when you got
mm,
Jamaican Nico Brett, who comes in at 7 goals, 3 assists in 23 matches. And then you've got uh, Frank Lopez, who was from Cuba, 5 goals, 2 assists in 20 matches. It's going to be the battle of the forwards. Uh, for me, RGV FC is going to have to establish the tempo of this game to try to get on the front foot first, only because they haven't scored in the last 3 matches. But the thing that comes to their advantage is that they've been able to score. If I can serve myself correct, uh, 3, 8, 9, 11 goals in their last 5 matches on this recent rodeo road trip, even though there hasn't been an actual rodeo in these parts of town in the Rio Grande Valley. It's just a term I use when Texas teams leave their home base for like over a month and come back to play a very, very challenging game because it's a 6 pointer, regardless where the teams stand right now at the table, because you guys stand fifth in the moment with 42 points, and then you go all the way to 10th place where RGV has 33, just 4 points away from a playoff spot, which Las Vegas Lights currently holds. And if you just look up one more place above Las Vegas, you've got El Paso with 30 games, but they have 40 points. At what point does New Mexico United, uh, because they also need the points themselves to separate themselves from El Paso and just have that game in hand?
right. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the two games in hand right now are very important for New Mexico United because it's a 2 point difference between El Paso, as you put it, and we need to do the most we can with that. I mean, if we can make that 6 points for us, like two dubs, like that would be huge, and would certainly really help us close in on what the magic number would be, right, to clinch a spot. Um, currently we can still get, what is it? We have 42 points. We can still get, I believe, 60 points is what we're still looking at. 6 games, 18 points. So yeah, so we can still get 60 points. El Paso, if I'm not mistaken, has, what is it? 4 games left. So 12 points. So 52 points is about their max there. So, I mean, we got a little bit of ways to go, right? We need to be able to get, obviously, 53, to be able to like get ourselves in a position. So we're not too far off. We just need to probably put down another 11 points. I guess that's another, like, just 4 wins, if just to put it that way. Um, so I think yeah, these games in hands are very important for us as far as clinching a spot. But I do want to go back to, you're talking about top scorers, because we don't have Nico Brett currently in the lineup. I haven't seen a new set of media notes from the team just yet. Probably won't get those until Friday to know whether or not, but he has currently still been on the injury list every week, along with Austin Yearwood and Christian Nava, and Swartz has been out. Suggs has been out. Even though Suggs isn't on the injury list, I think he just probably didn't dress. They're probably just being safe about it. So Nico Brett has been out. So, I mean, again, like, I was thinking about this before I came on the show. look, Armando Moreno has returned from that injury, and match by match, he's gained more minutes, he's getting more fitness. This last match, he looked very hungry and certainly a little selfish to want to keep that ball at times and make some things happen. Kevon Frater also back, since he's been back, has really been trying to turn some things around. And, it really looks like they're playing a system that really accents his style. Chris Wehan is finding his late season form as well. And then Tabor Taka Preston has had some taste of the net and, is certainly trying to play his game, so like it could be any of those guys right now, so I wouldn't say really worry about the top scorer or who's been hot lately, because it's like if you look at the last 5 games, it's going to be really hard to tell who it is, because because there's been some clean sheets in there where we didn't score, right? And so it'll be hard to tell. Like everyone's like about pretty equal view for you if you were really trying to like nail it down. But I just think it's going to be probably one of those top 4 that they're gonna play a part in things as far as our who's scoring on our side. Now you guys have was it Penzion, right? Penzone, and besides Frank Lopez, who's also been kind of doing some things, right?
Yeah, I mean the loan acquisition of Penzone has been one of those cards that has struck gold for us. Even the reacquisition of Jonas Feldberg, who has somewhat reignited the RGVFC offense, which at points has looked very, very stagnant at various points of the season. And Frank Lopez, I mean, he's barely coming back from whatever sort of injury he's had, because his presence has been on and off the whatever he has gone through. And last night he was a super sub per se, came in, opened scoring, and then Penzone closed out the deal against El Paso. But for RGVFC, I mean, not only do they rely on themselves a lot more, but they're going to be one of those teams that's going to have to do a lot of scoreboard watching as the night progresses, because once their match ends, they're going to have a leapful eye on Las Vegas, Los Dos, and even to a certain point, the Sacramento Republic, who all play uh, on Saturday night. And you can even throw into the mix Colorado Springs for you guys, because they also host a very challenging Detroit City side on Saturday night as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're in a unique position, right? Because in order to host a playoff game, which is something that gets talked about a lot around here, I mean, we really need Sacramento to kind of fall out of form and lose a few matches that we can take advantage of, right? So that's, and them only sitting a point up. Not looking at the table right now to know how many matches they have played, but
Yeah,
we
they also have 27 right now. They also have a game in hand as well.
right. So I mean that very game could be the deciding factor between who's sitting in fourth, depending on how everything plays out. I mean, if you think about how things have been going this year, Ray, um, a lot of what is like the table right now is teams above and below losing critical matches at key times, right? Like Colorado was sitting pretty high, but now they're boom, like further down, a little further down than they were. And and then of course look at the teams below United. I mean, like maybe that's changed a little bit at times, but it's just been a really interesting year. Like we're sitting fourth, fifth because again, progress hadn't been made under us, and then also teams above us, kept us kind of in the conversation because they weren't winning.
For me, I would like to cite an article I read somewhere where it is really difficult for the last year's playoffs teams to repeat again as the same playoff teams from last season. And one of the two of those teams that are in that mix RGVFC, New Mexico United. RGVFC because they made it, and now because they're on the outside looking in, and New Mexico United because they just missed out, but now they're like in control of their own destiny at this point.
Right. And that's not been the case in previous seasons. We've always needed a few things to kind of help happen for us, except for the 2020 season. I mean, the team was pretty much kind of doing their thing. It was just about whether or not they could get that division, the division winner. But I mean, last year, like we got knocked out. You guys beat El Paso in a match that we thought El Paso was going to win, right? And so, you know, that, even after we had the match with you. So it was like, man, we were still hanging in the balance by one match that made or break us, you know what I mean? And and then that was the thing. But we were certainly happy with what y'all did in the playoffs, as far as we're concerned. So that was good for watching.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Just any final thoughts, predictions before we close out this podcast today?
I think, gosh, we had recorded last night, on Wednesday night. Our podcast will drop Friday morning just for the editing sake and how late we were doing it. But the predictions on there were far interesting. We definitely had like a 1-2 loss to RGV on there. We had what did we have? I think we had a 0-0 draw, and then of course I was probably a little bit more lofty and said like a 3-1 win for United. And so I think it's pretty across the board on our podcast as far as that goes. I would probably still hang on to the 3-1 prediction, not really to homer it, but just because I thought in the El Paso match that there were definitely at least like 3 or 4 goals that were there besides the one that was scored. And I think that if they maintain that consistency and the same sort of lineup, it's a possibility. The only thing that isn't is a new lineup and not the same sort of energy.
For me, I guess the final score line I will give is RGVFC 2, New Mexico 0. And then my bold prediction is going to be RGVFC 4, New Mexico United 3. I think New Mexico United will have the first strike if all goes to chaos, because I love chaos, but RGVFC will score in injury time on my bold prediction.
Okay.
Well, Chris, I would like to thank you for stopping by. And of course, please feel free to give a shout out to the podcast where New Mexico United fans can find you at for a preview of the uh, for the preview of Saturday night's match.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, our listeners can find us at we are Seek and Strike Podcast. We're on Apple and we're on Google. You can find us on Twitter under the handle Seek and Strike NM. Definitely jar with us a little bit. We'd love to be able to have a match thread or talk about points of the game. We'll definitely be trying to interact with you a little bit, Ray, as well, and kind of get the commotion going on there. And yeah, that's where you can find us and how you can engage with us.
And folks, you can find my stuff at the South Texas Border Sports on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram and Facebook. Folks, this has been another episode of the South Texas Border Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening. We shall see you on another episode. Hello, sports fans. Thanks for listening to another episode of the South Texas Border Sports Podcast. This is your host, Ray Silva. Be tuned next week for another great episode as we drop podcasts every Monday here on anchor.fm/STBS. Don't forget, our podcast can also be found via Google Podcast, Apple iTunes, and Spotify. Thanks for listening.